My presentation. My name is Michael Summers. I'm a behavior analyst. And as a behavior analyst, one of my focuses or interests is in sleep and other health-related behaviors. And I've done this presentation a few times, and I decided it would be useful and maybe interesting for some of you listeners out there to have a guide for registered behavior technicians or behavioral support staff who are in there doing direct services with our clients to be able to identify and communicate sleep concerns, which are commonly the first individuals on the behavior team who are going to notice if the parents haven't already noticed and reported it themselves. So an overview of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to look at the importance of sleep broadly, identifying sleep deprivation, addressing common sleep issues that occur during sessions, ABA sessions, communicating with caregivers about sleep, communicating with the team about sleep, as well as the BCBA or behavior analyst's role in addressing sleep concerns in order to give us an idea of scope of competency and the difference between the role of a direct support staff with a supervisor role. Today we're going to go over a few items from the RBT task list, second edition, that has been provided by the BACB. Specifically, we're going to go over items E1, effectively communicate with a supervisor in an ongoing manner. E3, reporting other variables that might affect the client in a timely manner. E4, generating objective session notes for service verification by describing what occurred during the sessions. And F3, communicating with stakeholders, which includes family, caregivers, or other professionals as authorized. Our first question here is, why is sleep important? From a behavior analytic perspective, sleep is a primary reinforcer, which is also known as an unconditioned motivating operation. And what that means is it's unconditioned because these are innately reinforcing to us as organisms and are often related to our survival. So these are things like drinking water, sleeping, building a shelter, having food, eating food, etc. These are reinforcers and the behaviors that are related to them, which have often been related to our survival. Sleep deprivation is an establishing operation. What that means is that when an organism is sleep deprived, that increases the value of sleep as a reinforcer. So sleep suddenly becomes really important to that organism, as well as increases the frequency of behaviors that have led to sleep in the past. So if there are behaviors in the past that have preceded sleep, and I'm sleep deprived, you're going to see me engaging in those at a much higher rate. And thirdly, ongoing sleep concerns might be a setting event. Now, what is a setting event? A setting event is a broad category of events preceding behavior that likely impact it. So for example, if I deal with the condition called insomnia, which is this ongoing extensive pattern of delayed sleep onset or having trouble getting to sleep, I might have a pattern of using more verbal aggression on nights where I had a really delayed sleep onset and I didn't get adequate sleep or sleep quality that night. This is really important to note as a behavior team, because we want to, again, identify those variables that are impacting the behavior in our sessions. Now, another reason why this is important, several of the populations we work with deal with an increased frequency of sleep concerns. So this is more prevalent, and this is more challenging for these individuals, specifically autistic children or those with other developmental disabilities may particularly be affected by sleep concerns. Some of the common issues that children and quite frankly those of any age deal with around sleep are bedtime resistance, sleep onset delay, multiple night awakenings, early morning awakenings. Parents deal with unwanted co-sleeping, as well as parasomnias, just to name a few. Now, what is sleep crucial for? It really helps us with our alertness and attention. If we are sleep deprived, we might be more focused on finding somewhere to lay down, finding somewhere to rest, than we are the question that someone's asking or what is occurring in our environment around us. It affects memory and learning, and there's a lot of studies related to retention of information and how it's related to sleep. It also helps with language acquisition, which is an important area that we're also hoping to make a positive impact in through our ABA services. It impacts mood. I don't know about you, but when I'm sleep deprived, I tend to be a lot more easily frustrated and irritable. Sleep deprivation is associated with anxiety and depression symptoms, irritability and aggression. Now, some of these are really broad and some of them are more subjective, but it's important just to be aware of these broad correlations or impacts that are related to sleep deprivation, so that we can start to clue in and ask questions and gather more information. It can increase demand avoidance. Now, counterintuitively, sleep deprivation can actually increase hyperactivity and impulsivity, especially in the populations that we work with. Autistic individuals who are sleep deprived might actually show up more as they're very quickly going from lethargic to running around, climbing, and seeking lots of sensory input. And it can also increase self-injurious behaviors. Now, this one is more of a specific possibility, and it's oftentimes related to self-injurious behaviors related to pain attenuation or wanting to get rid of pain. And sometimes these behaviors that are self-injurious, they momentarily take away pressure or pain, and so it's reinforcing to engage in those, although they do cause harm over time. And it worsens existing challenges, and so it's worth supporting healthy sleep and sleep that is going to set us up for success with the challenges that we already have and that the clients already have. How do we identify sleep deprivation? Now, I'm going to go over again, some subjective signs as well as some more objective ways that we can identify sleep deprivation. One that's very obvious is yawning, leaning or lying down more than usual. Dark under eyes could be a sign. Heavy eyelids. Now going back to hyperactivity, the sudden spikes or drops in energy. Some of our clients are more of what an occupational therapist would call hypersensory profile, which is they're constantly seeking sensory input through running, climbing, different ways. Uh, and and for those individuals, that doesn't necessarily mean they're sleep deprived, but the sudden spikes or drops in energy are a clue that we might be sleep deprived. Making more errors than usual, which can show up on our data analysis. Lower attention span, irritability, social avoidance, and I'd say more than usual. And some of the more objective information that we can gather has to do with sleep duration, insufficient sleep duration, number of times we woke up at night, waking up too early, and information on insufficient sleep quality is also a clue. Now, how can we address sleep concerns that come up during sessions? And this is really common, a client who maybe they do struggle with some kind of sleep disorder. Maybe they've been given like a generic sleep disorder, unidentified sleep disorder, or maybe they're struggling with ongoing sleep deprivation. What do we do in sessions to help make sure that learner is still getting good quality out of their ABA sessions and out of their learning? First, let's ask our companies about their policy on sleep. Some companies do have this, other companies don't, and it's more of, just defer to the caregiver, which I'll talk about in a moment. But if your company does have a policy on what to do if a client is already asleep or if they're falling asleep during session, then go ahead and find out information on that and follow that policy. Now, what are some ideas of what we could do if we show up at session and our client is already asleep? The first thing we want to do is notify the team as well as defer to the caregivers. So we want to let them know in clear communication what we've observed. So we can say, hey, Miss Harrison, I noticed that Sue was asleep when I arrived just now, and are you wanting to wake her up? And we can sort of check in with the caregiver that way. Now, the parent might decide they don't want to wake Sue up, so they're going to cancel today. We can't have a session if our client is asleep because our client isn't able to attend or be involved with our ABA session at that point. Or if the parent is trying and can't wake them up, let's go ahead and cancel session. Now, what do we do if our client is not asleep when we arrive, but is falling asleep actively during session? Some ways that we can sort of make sure that we get a good quality ABA session while also being helpful to the client overall. because we don't want to do something that actually inadvertently makes the client's sleep concerns worse. So one thing we can do is incorporate movement into our session. Oftentimes that can help signal to our brains it's not time to sleep. We can have a break to enjoy some water, some cold water, an energizing snack, something that's going to give a boost of energy and increase alertness. And another one that we might not think of but is more on the obvious side is increasing sunlight or access to bright light. So if we are conducting our session primarily indoors, we can go ahead and open the blinds, open the curtains, and let in some more sunlight, as well as if we have dimmers, we can increase the light, or we can also do outdoor activities. So something that can be helpful is going to the backyard and doing an activity on a sunny day, or just going for a walk outside. Sunlight signals to our brain as well that it's time to be awake, and that's related to what's called our circadian rhythm, which is our body's internal clock related to when we are awake and when we are asleep. Now, how do we communicate with parents about sleep concerns besides the situations that I just reviewed? Well, something that I suggest and I recommend in general for the behavior team is to check in with the parents during the session, either at the beginning or the end, and to ask a couple of general questions just to get information on setting events and how that client is doing going into the session, or sharing observations if we're checking in at the end of session. So in that way, we're able to gather more information. We can ask specific questions to the parent, such as, how was Sue's sleep last night? You mentioned that Sue has been having some troubles with their sleep at night. Can you tell me more about that? We want to avoid judgment in asking questions and gathering information, and we want to avoid giving advice. Sometimes it's easy to hear a piece of information and then quickly know, oh, I know what to do, or this is what I would do, and provide a recommendation. Really, what we want to do in this context is avoid doing that and focus on gathering information, as the role of the BCBA is to paint a full picture of what's occurring and really go through a clinical decision-making model to determine what to do first and what to recommend first. We want to maintain confidentiality and professionalism. Professionalism by the way that we communicate with the caregiver, the way that we ask questions. We're going to avoid asking any overly personal questions, although sleep is very personal in and of itself. We're going to obviously only share that information with the behavior team. And lastly, what we want to do is record the parents' report on sleep concerns, record it in our notes, and communicate that with the team. Now, how do we communicate with the BCBA and the behavior team about sleep concerns? First, we want to share any information we've gathered about the specific sleep concern. So maybe mom has indicated, oh, Sue has a hard time falling asleep at night. So we want to input information. We want to say either Sue is having a hard time falling asleep at night, or if you want to use more technical language, you can say Sue has been experiencing delayed sleep onset. We want to input both subjective and objective information, and I'll give an example of that in just a moment. And we also want to indicate whether this is a one-time concern or if this is ongoing. Oftentimes, we want to know about a one-time situation so that we can note it on our graphs. That way, when we do an analysis, we might see quite a big change in a behavior that we're tracking, and we'll be able to go back and note, oh, Sue was sleep deprived that day quite a bit. Or other events we would look at, oh, Sue is sick with a cold. Johnny's sick with the flu. And we also want to note if it's an ongoing concern, because that's really important then for the behavior analyst to talk to the parents and initiate problem solving for that concern. Here's an example of session note. Now, session notes vary from agency to agency. I'm just going to give you a very broad example. The prompt on this note is, how did the child respond to parent participation? What did the child excel in during the session? What was the focus of the day? How did it go in general? So very general prompts. And here's an example of recording a lot of this information. So upon arrival, Sue was observed sleeping on the couch. So that's an objective piece of information. Sue's mom reported she had been asleep for 30 minutes. She mentioned that Sue slept only 5 hours last night and woke up 3 times at night. She decided to wake Sue up and continue the ABA session as planned. So there are a lot of objective pieces of information in this first short paragraph. How long she had been asleep, how long she slept last night, how many times she woke up last night, and as well as the parent's decision of what to do. And the second paragraph is more of subjective information. Sue's attention was low compared to a typical session, even when provided with preferred items and activities. She was observed leaning over, attempting to lie down, and her eyelids were heavy intermittently. These are more of those subjective signs, but they can still clue us in and give us a full picture of what's going on. The last couple of sentences or sentence, Sue's mom and the RBT ran maintenance goals to lower the response effort required and provided access to water, a snack, and movement breaks to assist with arousal and attention. So that's just, talking about what you decided to do as a direct staff in order to support your client to have the best learning experience that session. Now, let's look into what the BCBA's role is in addressing sleep concerns. First, as a BCBA, BCBAs identify the scope of practice, and what that means is, am I competent, am I qualified based on my experience and knowledge to assist with this problem, and do I need to refer out if needed? A lot of problems related to sleep might also be medically related, and so we want to be able to identify if the parent has already consulted with the child's or the client's primary care physician or pediatrician, or has a doctor, even a specialist that is already aware of this concern and already providing medical guidance. It's really important that we rule out medical causes or that they're getting medical treatment while we provide support, behavioral support. An important thing BCBAs do right off the bat is defining the sleep concern. What is our main focus of how we're going to support? How can we measure that sleep concern and assess ongoing if our treatment is effective? Some example assessments, I'll just briefly name a few. Greg Hanley's sleep assessment and treatment tool, which is a functional behavior assessment. We can also look at things like sleep diaries, sleep information and data collected from data sheets, parent interviews, medical record reviews, including what medications the client is taking. BCBAs then design an intervention that's going to help support this client to get better sleep and ultimately have improved learning outcomes. And typically all of this is going to occur through parent training, but the BCBA might also program for skills that can be targeted during ABA sessions in order to assist. Some example programming is modifying the environment, non-contingent reinforcement, differential reinforcement, just to name a couple. BCBAs collaborate with parents along this process, oftentimes because of the context and the concern. It's going to be, we're heavily relying on parents in order to support their child to get better sleep. Behavior analysts monitor progress and assess social validity, meaning that we want to make sure that our interventions are working and helpful, as well as the parent and the client are okay with the interventions, they accept them, and they're acceptable. Lastly, a really important thing that behavior analysts do is we collaborate with other clinicians. This could be occupational therapists, again, the medical doctor, speech and language pathologists. We do this in general, but specifically for sleep, it's really important that we collaborate with the medical doctor. Sometimes we can talk about medication side effects, and we can discuss, or we can prompt the parent to discuss with the doctor about timing of medications, for example. And lastly, what I want to say is it's really important to have great communication on a behavior team, not just for sleep concerns, but in general, to be able to share information that is going to help our client have a better quality of life and be able to improve the BCBA's also efficacy and the parent's efficacy in supporting their child. So overall, the way that you contribute as a registered behavior technician or behavior interventionist is you are very much an integral and main stage part of behavior services, and you're very valuable in your ability to observe and also share information about your client. Here are some of our references you can pause and look at if you're interested. And thank you so much for listening today, and I hope that was helpful for you. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. My email is Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, Summers, S-U-M-M-E-R-S, 09001 @gmail.com. And you can feel free to reach out to me with any questions. Thank you.